welcome to this lovely Thursday. I am going to now share my screen. Go to the back of my presentation. Okay, I hope everybody's good. Now, I'm gonna put in present mode. This is our agenda for the day. We're gonna chat a little, welcome goals. I'm gonna give you a little poll, find out who's here. We're gonna talk a little bit about collective efficacy. Then we're gonna look at 3 different practices that will help you feel collective efficacy and acquire that. And then we're in the midst of that, we're gonna talk about some protocols to help, and then we're gonna talk about some next steps for you. Originally, Beth was on with me, but now it's Heather. So you can see I'm up there, there's me, but this is actually supposed to be Heather. Beth is lovely too, but again, we have Heather, who is really sort of fabulous and a math specialist and a K through 5 expert and a data guru. Her organizational skills are astounding. Here's my emoji with the help of my teenage children that I created. So hello, and we're happy that you're here. This is a rough time of year. So thanks for coming. Like, it's the roughest time of year. My superintendent in Kittery actually wrote a note to this whole town asking that everyone read their emails and then wait overnight to send them because they might feel differently in the morning. So, oh, thanks, Bill or William, you got my reference. I won't throw away my shot. I'm not throwing away my shot. So anyway, thanks for coming. I know it's a rough time of year, so I hope that this will make you kind of happy. And you should all feel free to write in questions in the chat session, but also Heather's gonna watch you. And if you want to raise your hand, you can also just unmute, and that would be lovely. So there's for logistics. Still letting people in, which is fabulous. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little poll right now to find out who's with us. So here we go. Is everybody ready? There's 3 questions in the poll. It'll ask you at what level you work, what kind of work you do, and then if you're on a team, what kind of roles you take or would take. So you should be seeing that now. Nobody has started filling out the poll. So I'm wondering if you are seeing the poll or getting the poll. Anybody want to write into the chat?
Oh, I filled it out. I got it and I filled it out.
Huh. You did?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I got it, but it's not submitting.
Oh, mine submitted, I think. It went away.
when yeah. So
I got mine and filled it out.
Nicole's worked, Jennifer's worked. None of the results are going into the poll. Heather, are they going into your poll?
They are.
Honey, can you take over? I'm going to stop my share, or maybe you can just tell the results. That would be fabulous.
Okay, so we have here for the high school level, it's basically high school, middle school, elementary. It's like a third, a third, a third.
Okay,
so
cool.
And then we have 40%-ish of classroom teachers. We've got about 13% of special ed in ELL and about 10% of unified arts or math or ELA coaches, and then 15 to 20% administrators.
Okay.
And then on my team, most of them are facilitators, about 45%. And then we have some recorder note takers at about 33%. And the rest are materials or food dudes, data managers, cheerleaders, and that are about 25% or more.
Okay, Awesome. You guys don't
Actually,
look
cheerleaders are 40%.
oh, good. I was hoping that would be higher. All right, we're all cheerleaders. I'm happy to have so many high school people here. We don't always get to work with high school teachers, so thanks. I'm here. And fabulous. Welcome, everyone. Definitely jump in if you have questions. So the first thing we're going to talk about is collective efficacy, and which is the big why of why we're doing this. And then your goal by the end of the next 50 minutes or so, I want you to think about one thing that you could try of what you've seen. And then at the end, I'm going to ask you to actually make a decision about what your next step for implementation might be. Okay. So collective efficacy. This phrase, it's fun. When I was in social work school 100,000 years ago, I remember this as a concept that I really latched onto. And it's always nice when you've been through school and then the name comes up again. So this guy, Albert Bandura.
Right? Yes. And forces.
Thanks, Heather. Albert Bandura, he coined the phrase in 1997. And the concept of collective efficacy is basically the group's confidence in its ability to meet its goal, right? It's a confidence you have in your team members. It's a confidence that together you can make it happen. And conveniently, John Hattie, now, John Hattie's the guy, and he's, I don't know if I talk about this in the next slide or not, but I'm gonna do it off of memory because I can't remember it, but he did this meta-analysis of all these different studies, and he created a list of the most effective strategies and techniques and events and variables, right, that impact student learning the greatest. So John Hattie, in all of his research, also put collective efficacy at the top of his list. So there's 1,500 meta-analyses, and in 216, his list changes. You know, it changed in 2016, it changed again in 2017, but collective efficacy is always up there with descriptive, timely feedback, and then also students monitoring their own efforts and keeping track of their success. So collective efficacy is very powerful. And I really liked this stat where it says, according to Hattie's research, collective teacher efficacy is greater than 3 times more powerful and predictive of student achievement than socioeconomic status. That's a big statement, right? Because we know that there are all sorts of variables that correspond with socioeconomic status. One of the biggest being radically less verbal language in a household, right? So kids in impoverished households end up with a fraction of the language development that wealthier households have, because, you know, in wealthier households, you have parents that are coming from more educated backgrounds. They are able to spend more time enriching the vocabulary of their kids. And they're also able to spend money to send their kids to all sorts of fun and exciting things that allow them to build that vocabulary and that context. So this statement, right, that collective efficacy is 3 times more powerful than socioeconomic status is gigantic. So I say that because I would like for everyone to engage in activities in their buildings, right, where, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble forwarding my slide. Wow. Okay. Where you're building that sense of efficacy with your teams, with your whole staff, you know, not to mention the fact that in a building where collective efficacy is felt, you can feel that in the culture and climate of the building. The kids feel it, the teachers feel it, the administrators feel it, the parents feel it, so that not only does it have direct impact in the classroom, but it feeds the environment in a really beautiful way. So I'm going to let John Hattie, because for those of you that haven't watched this man, you should. And I'm going to ask you about that collective efficacy. If you could just listen to this video, it has to go to Vimeo, so you'll have to excuse me for a sec, and I'll make it big. Yell if you can't hear it, okay? And I'll stop.
Well, the new number one in visible learning is teachers' collective efficacy.
Can you hear it? Okay.
On the one hand, that's exciting because it confirms the story. On the other hand, it's a bit of an unfortunate title. It kind of implies that having efficacy, having confidence, having all the teachers in the school believing they can make a difference, it's actually more than that. Now, to have a meta-analysis, you have to have lots of studies. This is not a new idea. This has been around a long time. But it's just that Rachel Ells was the one that pulled it all together to show what its combined effect was. And the message I want to get across, it is teachers working together to have appropriately high, challenging expectations of what a year's growth for a year's input looks like, fit with the evidence of impact. And that's what sustains it. It isn't just growth mindset. It's not just rah-rah thinking. It's not just, oh, we can make a difference. But it's that combined belief that it's us that causes learning. It's not the students. It's not the students from particular social backgrounds. It's not all the barriers out there. Because when you fundamentally believe you can make the difference, and then you feed it with the evidence you are, that is dramatically powerful.
Okay. So there's a little bit of a catch to collective efficacy. Can you guys just write in the chat what you heard him say about what is a key component to making collective efficacy benefit students? What does he say? It has to be paired with what? A sense of collective efficacy has to be paired with rigorous instruction. Anything else? Belief, yes. I agree. Some of the, believe in yourself, it's a little bit like growth mindset, right? There's a word he used the word impact, right? He used the word evidence of impact. So when you combine this belief, this confidence, this growth mindset, this interdependence, right, with your team, but then you combine it with evidence of impact, that's when the good starts happening, okay? So what I want to know from you is, what are some of the things that are happening for you on a regular basis that foster that sense of collective efficacy for you? And you can just chat, you'll get familiar with this, but the flood the chat means exactly that, flood the chat. So what are you guys doing that builds that sense of collective efficacy? And if you want to raise your hands, you can just raise your hands and talk. That's okay too. Heather, you're watching yeah, thanks. PLCs with an agenda, yay. Webinars, book groups, studies, communication, leadership, team, and PLCs, co-teacher collaboration. I'm so happy you're doing that. My last webinar, Tina, was on co-teaching and collaboration. What else? Use of data, seeing growth. We meet together, we talk things out. Good, okay. Instructional routines, great. Vertical meetings. Oh, Karen, you're lucky. You're so lucky because that's a rarity. Vertical meetings, that's fabulous. Okay, thanks you guys. So, of course, I anticipated that somebody would mention PLC. So I want to talk about PLC for a second. Demonstrate success. If you've done more work with us, you realize that this is like our banner. It's our forever banner is PLC. And PLC has started to almost be like a poisonous word. And that's too bad, because we have found repeatedly in our work that when you go to schools that are doing PLCs with fidelity, that growth is made and teachers feel efficacious. The problem that happens is that there's a lot of times when PLCs are not being done with fidelity, and the belief is that they are, right? And there's a mixed up understanding of what PLC means. And so let's try to talk about that a little bit. There's a lot of good work that happens in grade level teams, okay? Not all of it, that leads to collective efficacy, right? However, not all of it is PLC, okay? We'll talk specifically about PLC right now. So the enduring ideas of PLC, right, or this idea that we ensure through our PLC practices that students are learning. And what that means is we're looking for results. Okay, PLC is implicit in this whole idea of professional learning communities is, you know, it's great that we're sitting and talking about instruction. We might have a shared read. We might get together and talk about curriculum mapping. All of those conversations are so valuable, but that's not necessarily a PLC or a PLC meeting per se. Because when, and I don't want you to think that this is the only way to interpret this, but what we do at DS, we think about PLC as data driven. And so when you're in PLC, you are within a data cycle. So you're doing something around looking at student data, analyzing it together, coming to conclusions, designing interventions or reteaching strategies, and then reassessing to see growth, right? To see impact. So that's how we ensure that students learn. Implicit in all of that is this creation of a culture of collaboration. When a school is doing PLC, right, that culture of collaboration is evident. You're having grade level meetings and grade levels are working on PLC goals. You're having vertical meetings where you're talking about the goals, the student achievement goals that you're pursuing, okay, within your grade level and how they relate to the grade levels before, the grade levels after, right? And again, you're focused on results. And so those are the ideas that we think about when we define PLC, professional learning communities. And these are some nice quotes by Richard Dufour, Richard and Rebecca. Got it. And Richard's not around anymore. Rebecca is, yeah. It's an empire. A solution tree, PLC, like this Richard and Rebecca, they introduced the world to PLC and now they're basically an empire. But doesn't mean that the lessons were still good. So we ensure that children learn. The fundamental purpose of the school is to ensure that students learn rather than to see that students are taught, an enormous distinction. I am assuming that everyone on this call, and feel free to write in, is familiar with that. I feel like this is something we talk about a lot, right? Just because we taught it doesn't mean it was learned. Our job is to figure out if it was learned, and if it was not, to do something different and or more. The second is this piece of collaboration, right? So in a PLC school, everyone owns students. We are systematic in our process of how we work together. We're interdependent in that process. And we analyze professional practice and we look for impact, okay? And these are some of the variables, right, of collaborative culture. All students are responsible for the entire school community, or the responsibility of, sorry, the entire school community. Our colleagues offer us powerful opportunities for our professional growth, believing in that, believing in that and investing in that. And when all team members contribute, the quality of our work is better. So the true definition of interdependence. And again, we're back to this. We look for results. We seek relevant data and information. So if you're not involved in a data cycle, you're not doing PLC. Now, data can take many forms, right? It can be formal, it can be informal, it can be quantitative, it can be qualitative. but somewhere in there, you're involved in a data cycle to look at growth. Jean writes in, I like the concept of whatever it takes. Start with the data to inform instruction interventions and continually, reassess and readjust to get positive results. And Gloria writes in, it is crucial to give appropriate planning. Yes, planning time. Absolutely. I like the whatever it takes too, Jean. So this is just a visual to talk about how PLC sort of manifests in the whole school community, right? So we have a shared purpose, shared vision, collective commitments, and shared goals that we agree on at each grade level and then also vertically. And we carry on that vertical dialogue as well. I don't want to stay here too long because we're not only talking about PLC today. This is something that I wanted to make sure to convey to you if you hadn't thought about it this way. The way we do it in DS is we encourage folks when they're working in PLCs, because sometimes when you're having this ongoing data conversation and then you're intervening and then you're reassessing and then you're reflecting, it's hard to decide. There's so many things that you want to accomplish and that you want to help students with. And what we often suggest is that teams focus on one content area and one year-long goal within that content area, right? So, for example, at the high school level, if you were going to focus on ELA, right, you might spend your whole PLC year. Your goal of your PLC might be that 80% of students will be proficient at citing evidence to support their claims in a written text. 80% will be proficient according to an end of the year performance task. So in order to make that happen, your PLC cycles, your cycles of inquiry will all build towards that ultimate goal here at the end of the year. So, you know, your first cycle might be around finding evidence in grade level texts and identifying it, okay? Your second cycle might be creating a claim, all right? So you're gonna break down those skills throughout the course of the year to get to this end of the year goal. Important around this for this end of the year goal is that it's a big foundational standard or skill that is transferable, right? So like citing evidence for text, in text, supporting claims rather with evidence, that's as transferable as it gets. You're doing it in all disciplines, you're doing it your whole life. You're doing it in oral presentations, you're doing it in arguments, you're doing it in writing, you're doing it everywhere, right? So when you're thinking about that, it's really nice to prioritize that way and set a singular goal so that your team is working collectively towards that shared goal for your students. And you can even make that goal, if you want to embrace this as a school and you haven't done it yet, you can make that goal something universal. Like that citing evidence for to support claims, you can use that, a math PLC can adopt that goal, a history or social studies PLC, a science PLC, right? So you can also choose a school-wide focus as desired. Just looking at the chat. So anyway, that's a little bit about PLC and collective efficacy. I agree with you that PLC is key to this sense and positive, effective PLCs. The work, some of the protocols and the processes I'm going to share with you now this is all work that can be done in PLC. Okay. This is about analyzing not so much the quantitative data that you would look at on a spreadsheet, okay? But this is about actually using student work in the data process. This first process I'm going to show you has more to do with calibrating assessments than it does getting meaning out of student work. I'm going to show you, we're going to talk about another process later that focuses more on using student work as a launching point for inquiry. This process is important for making sure that your team is all on the same page about what an assessment means, what is being assessed, what are the criteria we're using to assess, so that when you do collect data and you look at student work, you're all working with the same set of expectations and a common understanding of those expectations, so that the results that you come up with are valid and reliable, so that you can have valid and reliable conversations around those results. So this visual unfolds the process I'm going to talk about over the next few slides. Are there any questions, Heather, or that I'm not? I know I have the chat open, so.
I haven't really seen questions. There's just Gloria had said, just in regards to the last bit that you were talking about, plan, brief, execute, debrief. So
Yep.
Those are her.
Thanks, Gloria.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this step one, okay, this protocol, and all of the protocols that you're going to see are all in a folder, or not quite yet. I have to put them in after the presentation, but they will be by the end of the day today in a folder with a attendance certificate and the slides. And you will get an email tomorrow that will lead you to that folder, and you'll be able to access all the materials. In addition, just in case you're wondering, the recording of this will be posted to our YouTube site under the heading of school improvement. So these protocols, so when you're planning for an assessment, right, you're working with your team, okay? These are some of the questions that you're going to be answering in this process, right? You're going to be looking at your assessment. You're going to be talking about the direction words, the directives in the assessment, okay? Together as a team, you're going to be talking about, okay, what do our students need to have already? What knowledge do they need to have to successfully complete this task? What are they being asked to do to demonstrate their learning? Does what they're being asked to do match what you're trying to show, or what you're, in other words, if you're trying to assess a student's ability to cite evidence in support of a claim, you want to make sure that the task, whatever you're asking them to do, actually demands that they do that. And you need to sit down as a team and make sure that that's indeed the case. Of course, you want to know what standards you're assessing. I'm just going down the bullets now. You need to make sure that the process of the task is clear, okay? Are there skills that they don't have that isn't knowledge necessarily, but other skills, like, you know, for younger kids, like, are they going to need typing skills? Are they going to need computer skills? Are there, you know, it doesn't have to be writing that we're talking about. I mean, we tend to think of tasks as performance tasks and oftentimes heavy writing, but it doesn't have to be that way. Okay. You know, and then you talk about how do we prepare the students to take it. So that's all in your collaborative planning together. And this is a protocol that you are going to use. This is the note-taking piece of it, but it's going to go down and it's going to take you through the task itself to do that analysis. And these tools are here for you. I have a couple of things that I want to address here. Let's see. The required annual English proficiency assessment offers me a wonderful opportunity to share data and what I observe as my students take it, listening, speaking, reading, writing, and then share it with classroom or content teachers is universally welcome and leads to more effective collaboration. So Jean, I'm assuming that you are an ELL student? ELL, yeah, there you are. You're an EL teacher. Okay. Well, they are lucky to have you. So lucky. And I think all too often, like assessments like the access exams, that data is often not shared with the classroom teachers. And I think it's really, I know you're not talking about the access, but, or you may be, but oftentimes it's not shared. And so your team is very lucky. So Christine, I'm just looking at, what do you worry? I worry that the common assessments, they'll be paper pencil. Is there a way to have common assessment with student choice so that they can show that they know the standard? Yes, there is the answer to your question. You can give choice as long as you're very specific about what you're measuring. In other words, if you're not measuring writing, but you're measuring a student's ability, let me just think. Let's say you're measuring a student's ability to construct an argument, okay? Not specifically in writing. At that point, you can, and Heather, by the way, feel free to jump in, or anybody on the call, you know, if you can think of an example of this. I'm doing this off the cuff. You can create an assessment where a student can choose to do it orally or in writing, and you're still evaluating the same standard. This brings me back to thinking about UDL, Universal Design for Learning, right? Because one of the most important things that Universal Design for Learning emphasizes is this question of choice, giving a student a choice about how they would like to reflect their learning. And I think that you can do that. Even when I think about the performance tasks that we used to do with PACE, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we worked with the PACE initiative and there was a series of written performance tasks. All different schools did all different tasks, and it didn't matter because it was the same rubric. So if the rubric that you're using to show, or to the criteria that you're using to evaluate whether a student has mastered a specific standard can be used, then you're good to go, regardless of the form that the assessment takes. If that makes sense. Does anybody come up with another example? I'm just trying to think. You guys keep thinking as I'm talking, and maybe we can go back to that.
Well, I guess if you want to look at it in a math sort of realm, it's still performance task oriented. Everything that I kind of think of as a student choice would almost need to be some sort of performance task to show that they know the standards. But if you're looking at measurement, if kids want to show you how they have learned about measurement, they can maybe build something or show something or draw something about how they would create or design a specific, item or what have you. So it is like what you're saying, Karen, I've done this in the past, and the rubric is 100% what is needed to be able to ensure that kids are meeting that standard. So you just need to make sure that the way that you're measuring it is not, it's very easy to figure out if they've learned it or not. It's not objective or subjective. It's not subjective, it's tangible.
You've distilled the actual skill that you're assessing. So like for math, if the goal was to see if a student could measure using inches, how they show that, right? Your rubric can be phrased in a way that they can show it by, exactly what you're saying, building something, measuring their table, measuring their bed, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Anyway, that's the concept. Let's keep going. We're going to be here for 2 hours. Sorry. Okay. This is the part where this is you're doing with your kids. Okay. This is about setting expectations. This is a part of the protocol where you're setting expectations with your kids, and you're with your kids. You are creating your rubric, basically. Bye, Gloria. It's taped. Don't worry. There will be, everything will be accessible. Okay. Have a good day. So this is the part where you go back and you create that rubric basically with your students. Okay. So you're going to have a whole process here. where you're brainstorming with them, you're creating criteria, you're creating what indicators make up a good piece of writing, for example. You might break them up into groups, you might bring them back together, you might make an anchor chart. There's that this step has to do with what you're doing with your students. And here, whoops, sorry. And this protocol is all about developing that criteria with your students. Oh, I'm sorry, Patricia. Yeah, PLC is professional learning communities.
I was just typing. Suzanne is very fast.
This is one that I love. So you're back in your PLCs, you're working with your colleagues. And this talks about scoring of student writing. So the blue square talks about student writing. It does not have to be student writing. I have actually gone through some of these protocols and taken out the writing bent. This can be on anything, all right, that is some sort of performance task type of
so or send me a copy of that. Send me
so this is the
Holly, thank you.
place.
Holly, a copy, yeah.
Heather, you want to mute?
Yeah, you can go to the SAU, but also
Elaine. Okay, thanks. Whoops. Oh, chaos has erupted. Hold on, let me go back to my slides. So this is the teacher calibration, the calibration scoring student work protocol. And the outcome of this, like I said earlier, this is that first part of looking at student work where you're basically, sorry, you are basically getting together with your team, and I'm going to generalize it here, I'm going to summarize it. You are all sitting around and you are going to look at a piece of student work together. It could be a piece of writing, it could be a math task, it could be a recorded presentation by a student. It could be a lot of different things. And actually, that's one of my questions to you later about what disciplines you can use this in. But you are actually going to take your rubric and score together student work and then share the way you scored it. So one person is going to, so I'm just going to do it step by step. You have your student work. I'm going to sit down. Let's say Pam, Heather, and I are scoring student work together. We are each going to have a copy, or if it's a case of a video, you're going to watch it together. Everyone is going to have the rubric next to them and take notes and give that student a score in each of the rubric indicator areas. Quiet, silent, we don't talk. When that's over, a facilitator or the recorder projects basically a data sheet where you're going to go through and everyone's going to do a whip around and share how they scored that piece of work. The next step is you're going to start with the people that had very, very disparate scores. And you're going to start to ask those people to articulate why they scored a certain way. You're going to insist, however, that they bring their conversation back to the actual artifact and back to the rubric. So they have to use evidence. It's using evidence, right? They're making a claim. They're using evidence based on the rubric, based on the student work. And what comes out of this is a far greater understanding of the assessment and a far greater understanding of the language in the rubric and what it means for each individual teacher. You know, the danger of this, I've worked in, I looked at a lot of schools that have started like the benchmark assessment. I don't know if any of you are using for you high school folks, it's basically it's a running record for reading. And you read with a kid and you mark down, yes, no, mistake here, blah, blah, blah. And what happens is, I put that data in and created data sheets, and you'll have one student and one teacher who gives, their kids are doing stupendously. all their kids are on grade level and above. And then you have another teacher that's like in the dregs, and you're realizing that there's no agreement around what the criteria mean and the process. So this whole protocol is aimed at creating agreement and common understanding of the assessment and the tools, the assessment tools. Okay, any questions, just let me know. So now on step 4, you're going back and you're working with kids. Okay, so you're doing, this is when you're going back to the kids. Now you have a greater understanding of the assessment. You've started to score. Your kids are revising their work. You take back their work, and now that you have an understanding of the assessment and the tool, the rubric, you're in a much better place to score your kids' work. And you go ahead and you do that. Okay, boom. Then your next task with your team is to get back together again. And you're looking at a specific student's work to try to gain insight around instruction. So you're one teacher, like, so I will come to my team and I will say, team. You're going to describe the piece of work that you're sharing. Okay. You're going to.
So that will be another thing that doesn't require anybody to be in, just by hand.
You're going to describe the work. You are going to talk about what you think about it as a team. Everyone's going to do an analysis of it. You're going to use that piece of work to talk about what some of the implications are for that particular student, but also for the whole classroom. You can transfer that understanding to the grade level, to the curriculum, to the modes of instruction, to resources, and so on. Okay, so I'm going to show you. This is a longer protocol. Again, where it says at the top, this should be done after so it's after you've scored work and you've administered it and scored it. This is done after that. And the goal of it is basically, again, to get insights about a particular student's needs, but then also to take that information and generalize it out to the student population of what you need to do in your instruction as a team. It's a very, very rich activity. It takes time. So what I'd love to hear from you now is, how do you see using a process like this? You guys are from all different disciplines. Can you think of a project, an assignment, a skill in your discipline, or a learning target in your discipline, where this process of norming, calibrating your tools, first of all, but then also looking at student work together to analyze it for learning? Can you come up with any of you where you've either done this or you think that it would be useful? Science, math, social studies, essay writing, definitely. Solving equations, PEMDAS.
I would think for me, like as a special, like if you are using this almost as a reflective tool, if you see those wide range in assessment scores and you're not sure kind of where they would come, like this, that might be a really great start to kind of relook at that and checking, you know, after you've newly designed something and you're trying to give it a go. And then it's kind of that reflective piece by saying, okay, well, I earned all these scores of, you know, 1s or 2s here, but so like, how do you bring that back to figure out what part of that task needs to be re-looked at or redesigned, or, you know, so.
Yes, thanks, Pam. Exactly. You know, and even on a fairly straightforward task, like if you were to administer, especially in high school, I think about this, like sometimes you'll have a social studies test and it's pretty straightforward, right? It's like maybe short answer, multiple choice. But if you have one class who's done really poorly and one class that's done really well, right? It definitely behooves us, maybe these protocols aren't necessary, but to go back and look at all your scores together to think about instruction. and sort of expectations, to norm expectations at the very least. Norma, thank you. You knew that I was going to ask you about that. I like to learn stuff. So PEMDAS is parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Thanks. Composition of melodies. Oh, Patricia, I'd love to be in on that one. So I love to think about what that would look like. Okay. I hope that you get to, I do hope that you get to use some of these protocols for that. I can't emphasize enough how much more gratifying this work is, the work of teaching, when you are creating new and interesting ways for kids to demonstrate their understanding and experimenting with that, and then using your peers to build your own knowledge and to build successful practices that way. It's so much more fun for us as teachers. So thanks. Whoopsie daisy. Okay. So now we're going to talk about collaborative inquiry. We're switching a little bit. Okay. This has to do more with, less with assessment rather, and more with instruction. And this is not going to be entirely new to you. I just think that people don't get to use it. I'm going to whiz right by this. This is the whole protocol or the whole process on one slide, so that when you get the slides, you have it. But now I've broken it up. So we've had some really nice success with a collaborative inquiry process. And I have been talking about, everybody here at DS talks a lot about this collaborative inquiry process. It's rife with barriers, especially this year, but I'm hoping to get more and more people doing this. It requires it requires some culture and climate, a non-toxic culture and climate. But the idea here is that you're using your peers to learn about instruction, basically. And the sequence is that basically you're going to use your data to identify an area of focus. It could be writing, it could be reading, it could be social emotional skills, it could be self-advocacy, it could be 1,000 different things, but you're going to really hone in on something that's meaty and important for your particular students. And then using the data, then you're going to talk as a team about what your team wants to explore together within there. So like, for instance, if I'm going to do, I'll do reading comprehension, all right? So is our area of focus. And then maybe as a team, it's hard, like inference is really hard to teach. We need new strategies. We need some new methods to teach inference. We agree on that. Then we're going to look at some student work to figure out how our kids are doing in that area. And within that area, and so when I look at the analyzing student work or the thin slice protocol, these are the analyzing student work I introduced to you in the last few slides. Okay, that was that ending, that final protocol. We're going to look at a piece or several pieces of student work to get information about student learning. The thin slice protocol is a shorter, much lighter version of it, okay? And you're gonna think about, okay, well, this is what I'm seeing in this student work. Let's identify these 2 or 3 learning targets. So our team, we're gonna have a collaborative inquiry around these particular learning targets. Okay, there's steps 1 through 3. Now, there's 2 ways to go here. If you have an instructional coach, you're lucky, because there's less risk taking at the beginning, and you have greater expertise theoretically to model. It's not always the case. Oftentimes your classroom teachers are fabulous, and so you have that expertise. That's the idea here. But if you have an instructional coach, it's their job, right, to get up there and make the first move. So you can ask them to do it. Either way, if you have a coach, you're going to ask that coach to model a lesson that addresses 1, 2, 3 of those targets, depending on what the targets are. in one of your team members' classrooms. And like when you go to Columbia College and they do the reading and writing workshop and they come in and work in your schools, they call it the lab classroom. So you pick a lab classroom and everyone goes in and floods and observes that lesson, okay? If you don't have an instructional coach, there's going to be a volunteer from the team to go first, and you guys will simply rotate that responsibility throughout this process as you do these cycles. You're going to arrange for coverage for your grade level team. So for every grade level team member, so that you can all go in and observe the lesson. Now is when we write in the chat, or raise your hand or unmute yourself. What are the barriers so far? I'm going to open up the chat. Barriers, because I know
Coverage.
Coverage. Okay. I have, Brendan had an interesting idea. I'll go back to that. Getting coverage is a problem. Administrative support is a problem. Time. Okay. Time. So when we talk about this, this year in some ways, it was doable because you could poke in on somebody's virtual classroom, if at least while we were all virtual. But it's still, I never feel like it's your best teaching, like it's your best teaching for remote instruction. I'm gonna think about some ways. Now that you've come up with the barriers, I'm gonna ask you for some solutions. And then I'm gonna buff them up with some that I've thought of too. So, and William says there's no teams in high schools, just departments. Okay, but I mean, to that point, you do have department teams. And so within this, if you have 2 teachers teaching geometry, right, you can pair up together and carry out this process. So that's actually one of the solutions. Like, so instead of doing it all together, if you have to, you can do this work in pairs. Any other solutions?
Prioritize when you want to use these protocols, so it's not an overwhelming task, like you're trying to do it for everything, but you're being very selective on when and how to go about it. So it might help with the time or the.
Definitely, Pam, and don't try everything at once. I love Jean's sweet and bring food. Okay.
I had a question. It said something about team level or grade level teams.
Yeah.
Grade level team members. What about the specials like art, music, and phys ed?
So it's hard for you. When we've done this kind of work, because oftentimes you are the only person in your building that does what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You're either forced to go out to another school, to form that content team cross-district and do this type of work where you're able to go into somebody else's classroom, or you have to think about learning goals that are universal. So like, let's say something that you wanted to explore had to do with behavior, okay? Managing interruptions in your classroom and kids that are intruding into the, or getting in the way of instruction. So if that was your problem of practice that you wanted to explore, then you could indeed, if you had the grade level team that there was, a 3rd grade teacher, like 3 other 3rd grade teachers and a special ed teacher, you could actually do this process, but focusing on more behavioral learning targets, for example, to do this. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I'm in a very small rural district. There's only 3 classrooms. There's a kindergarten 1st grade class, there's a 2nd grade class, and there's a 3rd and 4th grade class. I am the only music teacher in that district. So basically my team would be me and that classroom teacher. discussing the behavior of her students, right?
Yeah, you can do that. And you could, a modified version of this is that she can come into your class and you can go into her class. Sometimes in that situation, I've seen that happen where you come in and you're observing a specific student as well. That's another way to frame this. So if there's a problem student, right? Then, or a student that's having problems, there's no problem students. So students that is manifesting some problems, to go into her classroom and observe, targeted, like this is what I'm looking for. And to make some observations about the way that she manages or doesn't manage that student, and then have a conversation, a collegial conversation around that, using a protocol is another way to work that in a small setting.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. When I was thinking about the barriers and I was thinking about some creative solutions, I'm going to share with you a couple of things that I thought about. So one thing is if your grade level team, or if you're at a high school, within your department, if you're teaching at a certain time, if you're teaching geometry at a certain time, and then algebra is being taught by 2 or 3 other teachers, or, swapping prep periods is a way to go. In other words, if during your prep period, right, you could cover somebody else's class while they go in and watch a colleague, and they can do the same for you. So that's one way to do this, or specials, prep periods or specials, sort of make deals with other teams to try to get coverage for this process. So that's something that I thought of. Videotaping is another way to get around this. Another thing you can do is set up a camera in one teacher's, obviously they have to volunteer. They're filmed teaching the lesson that you've all agreed on. And then you sit down, or you individually, it doesn't matter, view it together and carry out the protocol after viewing together. All right, so that doesn't necessitate any coverage at all. It just necessitates that you put in a little time to watch the video. Any other good solutions? Administrators, I think the buy-in within, if you don't have administrator support on this, it's a big problem. This sort of work has been, I get frustrated just thinking about that, because this sort of work has been proven to be so effective on so many different levels. I mean, in terms of collective efficacy, in terms of teacher learning, valuing, it's beautiful for the culture of your school. So what I would do is I would bring research to your principal. If your administrator is not supportive of this, then you really should go do the research route. And if you need research articles to support this kind of practice, I can help you with that. All right. Heather, how are we doing on time? I don't have my phone and I'm not looking at the clock.
You are over by 3 minutes.
Now? Oh man, I'm so sorry. I'm going on and on. I'm going to take 5 or 8 more minutes, okay? Because really the meat here is all these great protocols. So let me just go through this. The last thing is about data, and you guys probably know a lot about that already. So I'm going to go back one. I'm so sorry. Okay, so you're going to identify someone who's going to conduct a model lesson. You're going to have a pre-observation meeting. You're going to get together, make sure you all know what you're looking at. Ask that teacher what he or she might have something they want you to watch for. So while you're in there, you might as well do that as well, okay? And you can give that teacher specific feedback in specific areas. You're all going to be watching though for how that teacher is teaching to these specific learning targets that you've agreed on. And this is the observation form that you can use. It says, what does the teacher do or say? What do the students do or say? And what is the task and learning experience? All right, and then you're going to write about your other observations. And then you're gonna get together afterwards with your post-observation meeting form. And you're gonna talk about, you're gonna fill that I wonder about, I appreciated, and things that I can borrow. And then you're going to write down next steps for yourself. Okay, this is all done in your PLC together. And then you're gonna do it and you're gonna go forth and do your next steps. And then you're gonna repeat. Okay, and you're gonna do this in inquiry cycles, collaborative inquiry cycles. And again, all these protocols are here for you. Okay, I'm gonna whiz through this because if you know DS at all, this is like our brand. DS, data, okay. What do we want students to know? How will we know that they've learned it? What do we do when we have it? What do they do when they have? We are big into protocols when you're looking at data to remain outcome oriented and efficient, for trust, collaboration, to be rigorous and keep everybody accountable. We have a PLC binder of protocols that we use regularly that we can share with you if we work at your school. So, but a lot of them are going to be in the folder for you and you can have those. So don't, worry about it. This is our data cycle and the protocol that we use. You're always predicting what you think you're going to see. Often we use this with quantitative data. And then as a team, you predict and then you share your predictions. Then you actually look at the data. Everybody takes 3 to 5 to 7 minutes to look at the data quietly and writing down their observations, and then you share out. And only after you've done that, you go to the next phase when you're allowed to look at it and say like, oh, I think this is why this happened. Maybe this happened, and you're having conversations about the possible whys and your inferences over the data. And then there's phase 4 is the steps you're going to take, your implications. What do we do next? How do we respond to what we've learned from the data? Are we reteaching? How are we reteaching? What are some strategies? What do they need to learn? Maybe we don't have enough information. Maybe we need to administer another assessment, collect more data. Okay, and so this is all part of a protocol that you can use to look at data together effectively. And just some things to remember. All right, these are protocols you're going to see in that folder. It'll take you through that process. We're big on taking on roles so that everyone is participating and there's some equity and you're organized and efficient. Using norms. This is an example of the norms of collaboration, but you can also create your own norms. Come to meetings with your data organized. Make it visual and project it, or everyone needs to have a copy. You always need to make your data visual. Take notes. Take notes well. Organize your materials well. Keep them in a binder. Keep them in a folder. Okay? This talks about the roles and responsibilities again. Create your own norms. It's a really nice bonding thing. Norms keep you efficient. Even when you know each other really well and everybody gets along, norms are really important because it allows you to keep your colleagues who you love. It allows you to keep them accountable. So if someone is not being efficient in that meeting or they're multitasking and you don't want to offend them, if you don't have norms, you're out of luck. Whereas if you have norms, you can sort of say to that person, hey, John, you know what? No multitasking. That's our thing. It's like a shared, it's like you're being a club. Here's the rules for the club. And when you're in your meetings, pay attention to the norms. Okay, keep your norms vital so that you can use them to keep everybody focused. And this is the last, be nice, right? Be nice, and be nice. Thanks, Mr. Rogers. Okay. If you can, please, what are you going to do next? What's something you're interested in implementing from what you've learned today? If you could write that into the chat, I'd love it. And this is our last slide. I'm just going to put some resources up after this. So what do you hope to do from what you learned or talked about today in the presentation? And what might your next steps be? Anybody? Share process with coworkers, starting PLCs, connecting with music teachers from different disciplines, from neighboring districts. Templates for PLC meeting. Okay, awesome. I'm so glad. Help our school hire an instructional specialist. Yes. It's great. That's great, Pam. For special education departments, right? You want your special educators to be on your grade level teams, but they can also have a separate PLC and
Yeah, just looking at our work with IEP writing and goals and vertical alignment with sometimes goals on how that kind of plays out, or services. I feel like there's so much that we could do as a department and using some of these protocols and processes to really establish a common goal that we can kind of keep looking at. We always have questions around math and interventions. And so there's so much I feel like we could do with that.
So everything will be uploaded into the folder. Go and get all that stuff. And then if you have questions after you get all these protocols, please email me. I'm going to put up my contact information and get in touch. And I'm happy to talk with you anytime and help you free of charge on the phone. Like, just strategize about how you can start to make this happen, because we've now been doing this for a long time, so I can anticipate the pitfalls and help you take a giant step there. Marsha's pointing out that the ESSER funds are around, and they are, guys. There's money. Like, now's the time. Get that instructional specialist. Bring somebody in to refresh you on PLCs 2 or 3 times at the beginning of the year. This is the time, and that's what it's going to take to close the gap for these kids. Starting with over the summer, the PLC is it. This collective efficacy, these protocols are going to make a difference. So I hope that you'll have a chance to use them. Okay, you're very welcome. Jean, Marcia, everyone, Laura, Pam, everybody that's here, you're welcome. Thanks for staying on, even though I was a little late. We have one more session on the 2nd and the 3rd. Come and join us. We'll be showing you, helping you get some meaning out of your SAS assessment, your New Hampshire SAS, your summative. Okay, so you'll be getting info on that. These are some protocols. These are resources that I've used for this. National School Reform Faculty is it. They're amazing. They've been around forever. Center for Collaborative Education. If you're doing performance assessment, look on their site. They have tons of amazing resources. The protocols that I've used are partially based on their protocols as well. Okay, and that's my contact info. All right, all. Be well.